Today's topic really is how to cope with anxiety. So it's beneficial if we understand a little bit about anxiety disorders. And keeping in mind the day in which we're living with the COVID stresses going on, it's understandable that we all feel a little worried and anxious. So before we get started, I want to tell you just a little bit about who I am and about CMHA. So my name is Natalie Rector, and I have been with CMHA for about 6 months. CMHA is a national organization that has been in operation since 1918. So we're located all across Canada. The portion that we're in is CMHA of New Brunswick. So in New Brunswick, we have our provincial office, which is in Fredericton. We have an office in Moncton, and we have an office in St. John. And then scattered throughout the province through 11 different locations, we have things known as community education coordinators. So there are people like myself, and we're in a region. So I do like Zone 7 or Northumberland County. And we go out and do presentations. And of course, today we're doing them very differently as webinars. We also have a program called Working Stronger Together, which is in the Charlotte County area. So understanding anxiety disorders. And again, if you have questions, please go to the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and ask your questions in there. When we're finished the presentation, I'd love to go through them and answer your questions. Okay, so what are anxiety disorders? They involve intense, prolonged feelings of fear and distress. So an anxiety disorder is not somebody who just experiences anxiety from time to time. An anxiety disorder is a medical condition that somebody lives with all of their lives. So they don't appear to have an obvious cause. Symptoms interfere with functioning in everyday life. They're beyond the individual's control. They're different from short-term stress or anxiety responses. And that's what a lot of us are dealing with right now. It's the short-term stress or anxiety responses. And it's normal that we experience stress from time to time, that we feel a little anxious. That's a normal response to everyday life. So what does anxiety look like? Well, there are physical symptoms like racing or pounding heart, shortness of breath, feeling like you're choking, pain or tightness in the chest. In fact, many times people end up in the emerge thinking they're having a heart attack because it feels very similar to what we would imagine heart attack pain feels like. Trembling or shaking, tense, tight muscles, sweating or hot flashes, and discomfort and butterflies in the stomach. You know, when we get a little anxious about something, maybe it's a new situation, a job interview, something that we're unfamiliar with, and we get those butterflies in our stomach, that's just a taste of what it feels like to have anxiety. So what does it look like emotionally or psychologically? Nervous, frightened or scared, worrying about things and unable to stop, feeling stressed or uptight, and feeling alarmed or in danger. And this is a steady routine. It doesn't kind of come and go, but we're always kind of feeling this, okay? It's normal to feel these things from time to time, but when it's an overriding way that we feel, that's not so good. So then we have behavioral symptoms. Avoidance of situations that may cause or intensify anxiety. So you'll notice that people don't want to go someplace that they feel uncomfortable. Isolation and withdrawal. Social anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder, we don't like to go out and do, so we tend to stay away so that people don't ask us, and it just feels safer. So not attending an event or a commitment, calling in sick to avoid anxiety-provoking roles or duties, and avoiding parties or other social situations. So it really limits what we can and can't do because we feel so unwell or scared to do some of these situations. So what causes anxiety? Well, anxiety can be or may be caused by a genetic predisposition. So that's somebody in your family who maybe has had anxiety. It could be mom or dad or great uncle Harold or great aunt Sally. Somewhere in the family, somewhere down the line, somebody has had an anxiety disorder. Now, that's not to say that that automatically means that I am going to have an anxiety disorder, but what it means is that I'm genetically predisposed so that if the right trigger comes my way, I may develop an anxiety disorder. So situational stress. And many times situational stress, we may go through a period of anxiety, but we get through it, okay? When we have repeated situational stresses, sometimes that can develop into an anxiety disorder. So psychological stress, when things weigh on our minds all the time, that can be very stress-inducing. So a traumatic experience. And what we're finding is more and more that the traumatic experience is a very large factor in development of most mental illnesses and biological changes. So things that have gone on in our body that have changed things for us, and where we never used to struggle, now we're struggling. I'm looking at some of the biological changes that could possibly cause anxiety disorder, things like menopause or chemical, perhaps we experience a chemical imbalance in the brain. Maybe we've gone through a serious illness, a cancer or some other serious illness that causes the anxiety. Sometimes anxiety disorders are triggered by a specific event or a stressful life experience. They are more likely to occur when we have certain ways of looking at things, like believing everything must be perfect, or if we learn unhelpful coping skills from other people. Sometimes there just doesn't seem to be a reason. And interestingly enough, most mental illnesses, regardless of what they are, be it depression or bipolar, schizophrenia, all have some degree of anxiety. So people with anxiety disorders hide their illnesses well. They give believable reasons for avoiding anxiety-causing situations. They don't show their state of mind like a person who is depressed or a person who is experiencing mania mind. And anxiety disorder is an invisible disability. So what types of anxiety disorders are there? So anxiety disorders are mental illnesses. And there are different types of anxiety disorders. So we have something called phobias, and we're going to talk about each of these as we go through, okay? Panic disorder, agoraphobia, social anxiety disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. So let's look at each of those. So specific phobias, intense fear of something specific, an object, an animal, or situation. You hear people who are afraid of clowns, or they're afraid of spiders or snakes, that type of thing. Heights, dogs, enclosed spaces. Those are all examples of things that we can have the intense fear towards. So individuals with phobias adapt to the way they live to avoid that specific fear. Many people feel nervous around flying, but they still fly on a plane. Someone who has a phobia of flying may not even go to an airport. So phobias can affect relationships, school, work, career opportunities, and daily activities. So the goal is when somebody has a phobia, they avoid at all costs being near that thing. So panic disorder, it involves repeated unexpected panic attacks. So a panic attack is a feeling of intense fear or terror that lasts for a short period of time. The symptoms of panic are caused by adrenaline surging through the body. This causes the same physical response that would occur if an individual were confronted with some terrible physical threat. It involves physical sensations such as racing heart, shortness of breath, chest pain, dizziness, shaking, sweating, or nausea. Some say they feel as though they're having a heart attack, suffocating, or fear that they're dying. It can be a normal reaction to a stressful situation or part of another mental illness. Again, the example of flying on a plane. Many people are scared, but they still fly. So it's interesting to note a panic attack may develop out of the blue, and individuals may be struck by a wave of awful terror, like weak legs, pounding heart, cramps, and dizziness. They may become convinced that they're having the heart attack or about to die. As the attacks become more frequent, more and more time is spent thinking about them and waiting with fear for the next one. People experience panic disorder, fear more panic attacks, and may worry that something bad will happen as a result of the panic attack. So they avoid places and sensations or activities that remind them of the panic attack. So then we move on to agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is the fear of being in a situation where a person can't escape or find help if they experience a panic attack or other feelings of anxiety. It's known as the fear of fears. Most common phobic anxiety disorder and the most disabling. A person may become panic-stricken when confronted with his or her fears. So a person with agoraphobia may avoid public places and even avoid leaving their homes, someplace where they fear having a panic attack, especially if they've had one there before. Some people are afraid to leave their homes. Their safety zone is their home. So agoraphobia literally means fear of open spaces. But it's often a behavioral response to panic attacks. So the major factor of agoraphobia is fear of fear itself. So they may be an avoidance of public places such as streets, stores, public transportation, and some people may be afraid to remain alone. So getting help, mental health professionals are becoming much more knowledgeable about this disorder and are now better able to diagnose it. Once diagnosed, agoraphobia is treatable. To overcome a phobia, one has to address the situation that is causing the fear. Fear of a panic attack can cause as much anxiety as the attack itself. Individuals can develop anxiety reduction skills and new ways to express emotions. They are taught to learn how they are contributing to the development of the symptoms. Exposure therapy is a common treatment for people whose lives are dominated by the avoidance of fearful situations. In this therapy, the individual is gradually exposed to the feared situation and taught how he or she can cope. Cognitive therapy attempts to change the negative patterns or thought that cause and maintain anxiety. The individual is taught to identify and examine the thoughts and feelings that trigger his or her fears. So, social anxiety disorder, also known as social phobia. According to the DSM-5, a marked fear or anxiety about one or more social situations in which the individual is exposed to possible scrutiny by others. The individual fears that he or she will act in a way or show anxiety symptoms that will be negatively evaluated. Many people struggle with the social phobia thing. Sometimes we can still go out, but we're totally afraid of what other people are thinking about us. And sometimes the fear is so intense that we avoid going in social situations. So, generalized anxiety disorders. So, feeling of intense worrying about things of which they have little or no reason for such a level of concern. Anxiety may arise that causes worrying throughout regular routines and functioning, causing significant impairment related to even daily activities. The individual may experience difficulty in managing the anxious symptoms. So this anxiety is often far greater than expected. For example, intense anxiety over a minor concern. Many people experience physical symptoms too, including muscle tension and sleep problems, nausea, and headaches. A person anticipates the worst, even if others say they have no reason to worry. The person knows realistically that there should be no reason to worry, but they cannot control it. So other mental illnesses, some mental illnesses are no longer classified as anxiety disorders, though anxiety and fear is a major part of the illnesses. For example, obsessive-compulsive disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. So we're going to talk about each one of these. So obsessive-compulsive disorder, or commonly known as OCD. OCD is made up of unwanted thoughts, images, or urges that cause anxiety or obsessions or repeated actions meant to reduce that anxiety. And they are difficult to control. So OCD involves experiences of disturbing or intrusive thoughts. And although OCD involves obsessions and compulsions, it's actually quite rare that compulsions are acted upon. So an individual's experience of symptoms related to OCD is unique to each person. So I'm going to read to you a text that was copied directly off the National Institute of Mental Health site. And they produce a pamphlet containing the same information. It says, everyone double checks things sometimes. For example, you might double check to make sure that the stove or iron is turned off before leaving the house. But people with OCD feel the need to check things repeatedly or have certain thoughts or perform routines or rituals over and over. The thoughts and routines associated with OCD cause distress, and get in the way of daily life. The frequent upsetting thoughts are called obsessions. To try to control them, a person will feel an overwhelming urge to repeat certain rituals or behaviors called compulsions. People with OCD can't control these obsessions or compulsions. Most of the time, the rituals end up controlling them. For example, if people are obsessed with germs or dirt, they may develop a compulsion to wash their hands over and over again. If they develop an obsession with intruders, they may lock and relock their doors many times before going to bed. Being afraid of social embarrassment may prompt people with OCD to comb their hair compulsively in front of a mirror. Sometimes they get caught in the mirror and can't move away from it. Performing such rituals is not pleasurable. At best, it produces temporary relief from the anxiety created by obsessive thoughts. Other common rituals are a need to repeatedly check things, touch things, especially in a particular sequence, or count things. Some common obsessions include frequent thoughts of violence and harming loved ones, persistently thinking about performing sexual acts the person dislikes, or having thoughts that are prohibited by religious beliefs. People with OCD may be preoccupied with order and symmetry. They have difficulty throwing things out, so they accumulate, or they hoard unneeded items. Healthy people also have rituals such as checking to see if the stove is off several times before leaving the house. The difference is that people with OCD perform the rituals even though doing so interferes with daily life, and they find the repetition distressing. Although most adults with OCD recognize what they are doing is senseless, some adults and most children may not realize that their behavior is out of the ordinary. So I remember watching a documentary at one point, and the individual had OCD, and there was a carpet on the floor, and on the end of those carpets were tassels. And they spent the entire day straightening the tassels so that they were in perfect lines. Must be horrible to experience that. So post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, something is traumatic when it's very frightening, overwhelming, and causes a lot of distress. Trauma is unexpected. So PTSD involves the experience of intrusive symptoms, which would include re-experience a traumatic event. Symptoms may include flashbacks and vivid nightmares. So traumatic events may also include crimes, natural disasters, accidents, war or conflict, or other threats to life. It could be an event or a situation that you experience yourself, or something that happens to others, including loved ones. PTSD at one point was seen as the war illness. When people came back from war, they often had the flashbacks. And before we even knew it was known as PTSD, they knew there was something. So PTSD can make people feel very nervous or on edge all the time. Many feel startled very easily, have a hard time concentrating, they feel irritable, or have problems sleeping well. They often feel like something terrible is about to happen, even when they are safe. Some people feel very numb and detached. They feel like things around them aren't real. They feel disconnected from their body or thoughts, or have a hard time feeling emotions. People also experience a change in their thoughts and moods related to the traumatic event. For some people, alcohol or drugs can be a way to cope with PTSD. So getting help. There are several ways to get help, including counseling, medication, support groups, support networks, self-help strategies, and other natural coping strategies. So Anxiety disorders are real illnesses that affect a person's well-being. It's important to talk to a doctor about mental health concerns. Some physical conditions can cause symptoms of anxiety, and a doctor will look into all the possible causes. It's also important at this time to not let stigma prevent you from getting help. First of all, you may be amazed how many people you will have something in common with. Many of us today are dealing with or have dealt with mental illness disorders. Secondly, by not reaching out, you hold yourself back from being healthy again. Treatment should look at reducing unhelpful coping strategies and building healthy behaviors that help you better manage anxiety. Normal and expected anxiety is a part of being human. Each anxiety disorder has its own specific treatments and goals, but most include some combination of the following strategies. So, the counseling and support that we talked about, there's something called CBTs, cognitive behavioral therapies, and that's really changing the way in which we view ourselves. We tend to beat ourselves up quite regularly. So it's changing the way we talk to ourselves, how we view ourselves, and it teaches our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors to work together. One of the goals of CBT is to identify and change the unhelpful patterns of thinking that feed our anxious thoughts. So CBT can help you identify problem behaviors and replace them with helpful strategies. It's often the first treatment that is tried for treating mild to moderate problems with anxiety. Again, the support groups may be a good way to share your experiences and learn from others, and connect with people who understand what you're experiencing. Medications such as antidepressants or anti-anxiety can also be helpful, and they just kind of suppress the anxiety so we're not feeling so on edge all the time. Anti-anxiety medication may help for short-term difficulties or situations, but it usually isn't the best option for long-term use. Some types of antidepressants can help with anxiety, and they can be used for longer periods of time. It's important to remember that medications can't change all of the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that drive anxiety. So counseling is usually recommended. Some people take anxiety until some people take medication until their anxiety is controlled enough to start the counseling. So there are self-help strategies. So maybe it's stress management, problem solving, relaxation techniques, mindfulness. Those are all very helpful. How do you help a loved one? Many people who experience anxiety disorders like panic disorder and phobias can feel ashamed about their experiences. They may blame themselves or see their experiences as a problem with their personality, something other than the illness. It's important to recognize the courage it takes to talk about difficult problems. Supporting a loved one in distress can be difficult, especially if you don't fear the object itself. You may also be affected by a loved one's anxiety. For example, some people seek constant reassurance from family and friends or demand that they follow certain rules. These behaviors can lead to stress and conflict in relationships, but with the right tools and supports, these people can manage anxiety well and go back to their usual activities. So there are some important tips to remember. Thoughts and behaviors related to anxiety disorders are not personality traits. And although a loved one's fears may seem unrealistic to you, they're very real for your loved one. So instead of focusing on the thing or situation itself, it may be more helpful to focus on the anxious feelings that they cause. It may also help to think of times you felt intense fear or empathize with how your loved one is feeling. People naturally want to protect a loved one, but helping is harder for your loved one to practice. But helping anxious behaviors, like taking care of everyday tasks that a loved one avoids, may help. And it's harder for your loved ones to practice these new skills. It takes a lot of practice. If a loved one's behaviors are affecting you or your family, it's a good idea to seek family counseling. Counselors can help with tools that support healthy relationships. This one's tough, but be patient. It takes time to learn and practice new skills. Take time to congratulate a loved one when you see them using their skills or taking steps forward. And set your own boundaries. And seek support for yourself if you need it. Support groups for loved ones can be a good place to connect with others and learn more. So how can you help the loved one with an anxiety? Educate yourself on a specific illness. It's very helpful when you know a little more about the illness. Again, the patient's support, set your boundaries, seek supportive services for friends and family. So thank you for your time. I'm going up to your questions and answers. I'm going to stop sharing the screen just so that we can see each other. Let me see, questions and answers. How do people get into CBT? Okay, so we get into CBT through a place called Addiction Mental Health Services. They have counselors who are trained in teaching cognitive behavioral therapy. So your best bet would be to contact Addictions Mental Health Services. If it's somebody who needs it immediately, your best bet is to walk in to have an intake done. Otherwise, if you call, you're put on a waiting list and it takes a little bit longer. So are there support groups in Miramichi before or after the quarantine? Are we thinking support groups for people with anxiety disorders or anxiety as a result of the quarantine? Maybe I'll answer both. So as far as support groups themselves go, in Miramichi, would like to answer this question live. Sure. Can we get information presented today? And great job. We have a wellness group in Miramichi. So we don't call it a support group, but it's totally what it is. We call it a wellness group. Currently, we're actually meeting people with all anxiety all the time. Okay, so this wellness group is exactly what we're talking about. And we are actually meeting online right now. We're doing it through a Zoom webinar like this. And right now we're just doing open-ended conversations so that people aren't feeling so alone and they can connect with other people. It's not just people with anxiety disorders, it's any mental health issue at all. So when we meet in person, and we usually did that at the library, but of course the library is closed right now, we would pick topics and the people in the group would answer the topics. So yes, there is a wellness group. Bottom line, in Miramichi. And if you contact the CMHA phone number here, I check my messages daily. I'm actually in Miramichi and I run that group, okay? So that's that one. What are the Al-Anon groups doing during this quarantine? Sadly, I honestly don't know. Your best bet would be to call one of the Al-Anon phone numbers and see if there is a message. They may be doing online services as well. A lot of people are. And how do we get the information presented today? And great job. Okay, so on our YouTube page, if you subscribe to the CMHA of New Brunswick YouTube page, we have all of our presentations uploaded there. So you can access them there as well. And do you have access to any activity sheets or practice tools that can be used for people with anxiety disorders that you could share? Julie, if you would like to send us your email address, we can send you some sheets. Would that work for you? Okay. Are there any follow-up sessions that go through grounding techniques and how to create a safe space, anxiety-reducing office setups? That's another great question, Kristen. And I honestly don't know the answer to that. But again, if you would like to provide your email address, I'm going to do some research on that for you, and I will get back to you. Does that work? Some people would use sports or physical activity such as a gym to help manage anxiety symptoms. With such things no longer available, how can someone manage their anxiety better? Okay, I totally hear what you're saying, because exercise is a great way to reduce anxiety. Maybe if you could get out for a walk. It's physical distancing. So it's not saying that we can't have fresh air. So maybe if we were to, go for a walk through the woods, or I know of people actually who go for walks kind of with each other, but not really. One's on one side of the street and one's on the other side of the street, and they kind of yell back and forth to each other. But getting out and maybe going for a bike ride, using some of that energy. Okay. Due to the pandemic, we are working at home with a young kid at home. I can't concentrate on my work. Fears of missing deadlines make me anxious. How can I get help? Have you talked to your employer? I saw a meme, I know, on Facebook, and it said really, it's not so much that we're trying to work from home, we're at home trying to work through a pandemic. I would hope that the employer would make some accommodations for you. I can't guarantee that that's the case, but most of them understand the difficulties that we're going through right now. This is a very difficult time that we're living through, and something that we've never had. But it would certainly help to voice your concerns. Wendy, you would like those sheets as well. We will need your email address, and I'd love to send you out something. Any suggestions for caregivers on how to support seniors in nursing homes who are experiencing anxiety about the COVID-19 crisis? Wow, that is a tough one for sure. I have seen that people going to the nursing homes and going outside of their windows and talking to their loved one from the outside. I don't know if that's something that could work in this situation, but even a phone call is helpful. I'm going to ask a question to my coworker who's kind of behind the scenes, but in the answered emails, the email addresses that people are sending, are we able to access those?
I do have all the email addresses on the back end. The best thing that they can do, I've put the info at CMHANB.ca in the chat section.
Perfect.
So if they want any kind of follow-up forms, practice sheets, anything like that, they can send me an email at that email address, the info at CMHANB.ca, and I can forward them to you.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and OCD 15 years ago. am still unable to find a medication to control it. I've been on Ativan for 15 years. I may try CBT, great job with. Please do try the CBT. People have amazing results with it. It's not an overnight fix. I don't want you to think you're going to go once because it takes a lot of practice, but I'm sure it will help. Okay, just a note for staying in touch with seniors in care homes. I have been writing letters and sending them via snail mail to people that I care about. It's old school, but valuable. Oh, absolutely. You know what? I love getting letters in the mail, not bills, letters in the mail. It just makes you feel wonderful. And it's something they can hold on to and reread, and it's always there. Thank you so much for attending our chat today. Remember, at the close of this, when I close down the meeting, there will be a survey. Please, please, could you please answer the survey? Thank you very much for attending. I'm closing the meeting. It's been wonderful. Hope to see you again sometime.